Chocky continues as read by the bathroom reader. I am covering for the Plurality Report, who has left the online world in order to become an urban explorer for YouTube. Chapter 3. Shut up! I snapped suddenly. Shut up, both of you! Matthew regarded me with unbelieving astonishment. Polly's eyes went wide too. Then both of them turned to look at their mother. Mary kept her expression carefully non-committal. Her lips tightened slightly, and she shook her head at them without speaking. Matthew silently finished the pudding still on his plate, and then got up and left the room, carrying himself stiffly with the hurt of injustice. Polly choked on her final mouthful and burst into tears. I was not feeling sympathetic. "What have you to cry about?" I asked her. "You started it again, as usual." "Come here, darling," said Mary. She produced a handkerchief and dabbed at the wet cheeks and then kissed her. "There, that's better," she said. "Darling, Daddy didn't mean to be unkind, I'm sure, but he has told you lots of times not to quarrel with Matthew, particularly at meals. You know he has, don't you?" Polly replied only with a sniff. She looked down at her fingers twisting a button on her dress. Mary went on. "You really must try not to quarrel so much. Matthew doesn't want to quarrel with you. He hates it. It makes things very uncomfortable for us. And I believe you hate it too, really. So do try. It's so much nicer for everyone if you don't." Polly looked up from the button. "But I do try, Mommy. Only I can't help it." Her tears began to rise again. Mary gave her a hug. "Well, you'll just have to try a little harder, darling, won't you?" she said. Polly stood passively for a moment. Then she broke away across the room and fumbled with the doorknob. I got up and closed the door behind her. "I'm sorry about that," I said as I came back. "In fact, I'm ashamed of myself. But really, I don't believe we've had a meal in the last 2 weeks without this infernal squabbling. And it's Polly who provokes it every time. She keeps on nagging and picking at him until he has to retaliate. I don't know what's come over her. They've always gotten on so well together." "Certainly they have," Mary agreed. "Until quite recently," she added. "Another phase, I suppose. Children seem to be just one phase after another. Letting them get through them becomes a bit wearisome once you've grasped that the next phase is likely to be just as tedious in its own way as the last." "I suppose you could call this a phase. I hope it is," said Mary thoughtfully. "But it's not one confined to children." Her tone caused me to look at her inquiringly. She asked, "My dear, don't you see what Polly's trouble is?" I went on looking at her blankly. She explained. "It is just plain, ordinary jealousy. Only jealousy, of course, is never ordinary to the sufferer." "Jealousy?" "Yes, jealousy." "But of whom? Of what? I don't get it." "Surely that should be obvious enough. Of this Chocky, of course." I stared at her. "But that's absurd. Chocky is only, well, I don't know what he, she, or it is, but it's not even real. Doesn't even exist, I mean." "Whatever does that matter? Chocky's real enough to Matthew and consequently to Polly. Polly and Matthew have always got on very well, as you said. She admires him tremendously. She's always been his confidant and his aide, and it's meant a lot to her. But now he has a new confidant. This Chocky has displaced her. She's on the outside now. I'm not in the least surprised she's jealous." I felt bewildered. "Now you're beginning to talk as if Chocky were real." Mary reached for a cigarette, and I lit it. "Reality is relative. Devils, evil spirits, witches, and so on become real enough to the people who believe in them, just as God is to people who believe in Him. When people live their lives by their beliefs, objective reality is almost irrelevant. That's why I wonder if we are doing the right thing. By playing up to Matthew, we are strengthening his belief, We are helping to establish the existence of this Chocky more firmly. Until now, we have Polly believing in her too, to the point of a wretched jealousy. It's somehow getting beyond a game of make-believe, and I don't like it. I think we ought to get advice on it before it goes further." I could see that this time she meant it seriously. Imagine that was said by the mother. "All right," I agreed. "Perhaps it would be," I was beginning when I was cut off by the sound of the doorbell. I went to answer it and opened the door to find myself facing a man I knew I should have recognized. I was just beginning to get him lined up, that is, I had got as far as connecting him with the Parents' Association meeting, when he introduced himself.
"Good evening, Mr. Gore. I don't expect you'll remember me. Trimble's my name. I take your Matthew for maths."
I led him into the sitting room. Mary joined us and greeted him by name. "Good evening, Mr. Trimble. Matthew's just upstairs doing his homework, I think. Shall I call him?" Trimble shook his head.
"Oh, no, Mrs. Gore. In fact, I'd rather you didn't. It's really yourselves I wanted to see, about Matthew, of course."
We sat him down. I produced a bottle of whiskey. Trimble accepted his drink gratefully. "Well now, what's the trouble?" I asked. Trimble shook his head. He said reassuringly,
"Oh, no trouble. Nothing of that kind."
He paused and went on.
"I do hope you don't mind my calling on you like this. It's quite unofficial. To be honest, it's chiefly curiosity on my part. Well, a bit more than really. I'm puzzled."
He paused once more and looked from me to Mary and back again.
"Is it you who is the mathematician of the family?"
he asked. I denied it. "I'm just an accountant, arithmetic, not mathematics." He turned to Mary.
"Then it must be you, Mrs. Gore."
She shook her head. "Indeed not, Mr. Trimble. I can't even get arithmetic right." Trimble looked surprised and a little disappointed.
"That's funny. I was sure. Perhaps you have a relative or some friend who is."
We both shook our heads. Mr. Trimble continued to look surprised.
"Well, somebody has been helping. No, perhaps that's not the right word. Shall we say, giving your son's ideas about his maths. Not that I mind that," he hurried to explain. "Indeed, in a general way, I'm all for anything that gets him along. But that's really the point. When a child is trying to cope simultaneously with two different methods, it's more likely to confuse him than get him along. I'll be frank, I won't pretend that your Matthew is one of those boys you sometimes find with a natural, quick grasp of figures. He's about average, perhaps a shade above, and he's been doing quite all right. Well, until lately. But it has seemed to me recently that someone has been trying to... Well, I suppose the idea was to push him on, but the stuff he's been given isn't doing that. It's getting him mixed up."
He paused again and added apologetically.
"With a boy with a real gift for figures, it might not matter. In fact, he'd probably enjoy it. But frankly, I think it's too much for your Matthew to grasp at the moment. It's muddling him, and that's holding him back."
"Well, just as frankly," I told him, "I'm completely at a loss. Do you mean that he's trying to get ahead too fast? Missing out some of the steps?" Trimble shook his head.
"Oh no, not that. It's more a conflict of systems, something like trying to think in two languages at the same time. At first, I couldn't understand what had got out of gear. Then I managed to collar some sheets of his rough work and get a line on it. Here, I'll show you."
And, with a pencil and paper, he did for more than half an hour. As an audience, we disappointed him, but I managed to get a grip on some of it, and ceased to be surprised that Matthew appeared muddled. Trimble went off into realms quite beyond me, and when we eventually saw him off, it was with some relief. Still, we appreciated the concern that had brought him along to see us in his own time, and promised to do our best to find the source of Matthew's confusion. "I don't know who it can be," Mary said as we returned to the sitting room. "I can't think of anyone he sees often enough." "It must be one of the other boys at school who's a natural whiz at maths, and got him interested, although It's a bit beyond him, I said. It's certainly no one I can think of. Anyway, I'll try to find out. I left it until the following Saturday afternoon. Then, when Mary had taken away the tea things, and Polly too, Matthew and I had the veranda to ourselves. I picked up a pencil and scribbled on a newspaper margin, YNYYNNYY. What do you reckon that means, Matthew? I asked. He glanced at it. 179, he said. It seems complicated when you can just write 179, I said. How does it work? Matthew explained the binary code to me, much as Trimble had. But do you find that way easier? I asked. Only sometimes, and it does make division difficult, Matthew told me. It seems such a long way round. Wouldn't it be simpler to stick to the ordinary way? I suggested. Well, you see, that's the way I have to use with Chocky because that's the way she counts, Matthew explained. She doesn't understand the ordinary way, and she thinks it's silly to have to bother with 10 figures just because you've 10 fingers, when all you really need is 2 fingers. I continued to look at the paper while I thought how to go on. So Chocky was in on this. I might have known. You mean when Chocky counts, she just talks Y's and N's? I inquired. Sort of. Only not actually. What I mean is, I just call them Y and N for yes and no, because it's easier. I was still wondering how best to handle this new incursion of the Chocky element, but apparently I looked merely baffled, for Matthew went on to explain patiently. See, Daddy, 100 is YYNNYNN, and because each one is double the one on its right, that means if you start from the right hand and from the right hand end, 1, no, 2, no, 4, yes, 8, no, 16, no, 32, yes, 64, yes. You just add the yeses together and it's 100. You can get any number that way. I nodded. Yes, I see, Matthew. But tell me, where did you first come across this way of doing it? I just told you, Daddy. It's the way Chocky always uses. Once more I was tempted to call the Chocky bluff, but I put a thumb on my impatience. I said reasonably, But she must have gotten it from somewhere. Did she find it in a book or something? I don't know. I expect somebody taught her, Matthew told me vaguely. I recalled 1 or 2 other mathematical queries that Trimble had raised, and put them as far as I understood them. I was scarcely surprised to learn that they too were devices that Chocky was accustomed to use. So there we were, at an impasse. I was just about to end the rather fruitless session when Matthew stopped me disturbingly. He emerged from silent reflection as if he had made up his mind to something. With a somewhat troubled expression, and his eyes fixed on mine, he asked, Daddy, you don't think I'm mad, do you? I was taken aback. I think I managed not to show it. Good heavens, no. What next? What on earth put such an idea into your head? Well, it was Colin, really. You haven't told him about Chocky? I asked, with a quickening concern. Matthew shook his head. Oh, no, I haven't told anyone but you and Mummy, and Polly, he added a little sadly. Good, I approved. If I were you, I'd keep it that way. But what about Colin? I only asked him if he knew anyone who could hear someone talking kind of inside himself. I wanted to know, he explained seriously. And he said no, because hearing voices was a well-known first sign of madness, and people who did hear them either got put in asylums or burnt at the stake, like Joan of Arc. So I sort of wondered. Oh, that, I said, with more conviction than I was feeling. That's something quite different. I searched hurriedly and desperately for a valid-sounding difference. He must have been thinking of the kind of voices that prophecy tell of disasters to come and try to persuade people to do foolish things so they get muddled over what's right and what's wrong and what's sensible and what isn't. That's a different kind of voices altogether from ones that ask questions and tell about the binary code and so on. Quite different. He's probably only heard of the other kind, so he didn't understand what you meant. No, I should just forget it. You've no need to worry about that. No need at all. I must have sounded more convincing than I felt. Matthew relaxed and nodded. "Good," he said with satisfaction. "I'd think I'd hate to go mad. You see, I don't really feel at all mad." When I reported on our session to Mary, I suppressed any reference to the last part of it. I felt it would simply add to her anxiety without getting us any further, so I concentrated on my inquiries into the Y&N business. "This Chocky affair seems to be getting more baffling," I confessed. "One expects children to keep on making discoveries. Well, hang it, dang it, that's what education's all about. But one also expects them to be pretty pleased with themselves for making them. There seems to me to be something psychologically unsound, if it isn't downright screwy, when all progress is attributed to a sort of familiar instead of to self. It just isn't normal, and yet we've got to admit that his interests have widened. He's taking more notice of more things than he used to, and lately he's been gaining a sort of air of responsibility. Had you noticed that? I suppose the important question is whether once removed approach is likely to do any harm. The man Trimble wasn't very happy about the results of it, was he?" "Oh, that reminds me," Mary put in. "I had a note today from Miss Toach, who takes him for geography. It's a bit confused, but I think it is meant to thank us for helping to stimulate his interest in the subject, while at the same time suggesting tactfully that we shouldn't try to push him too much." "Oh," I said. "More Chocky?" "I don't know, but I rather suspect he's been asking her the sort of awkward questions he asked me, about where Earth is and so on." I thought it over for some moments. "Suppose we were to change our strategy, hit out at Chocky a bit," I suggested. Mary shook her head. "No, I don't think that's the way. She'd probably go underground. I mean, he'd lose confidence in us and turn secretive, and that'd be worse, really, wouldn't it?" I rubbed my forehead. "It's all very difficult. It doesn't seem too wise to go on encouraging him, and it seems unwise to discourage him. So what do we do?"